I'm visiting here now in response to a small request to do, kind of, if you want to call it a pastoral visit to Eswatini, to the diocese over there. And since that diocese comes under the administration of the Apostolic Nuncio here in South Africa in Pretoria, that's why I am here. So I'm here basically a host to the nuncio, who's coordinating this visit and has planned all the details of it.
Yes. And so speaking of this visit, the same visit to Eswatini will also see you deliver the annual memorial lecture in memory, of course, of Bishop Madlenko Ziswane. And the topic of your address will be Christian nonviolence and just peace. Now, this is something that the people of Eswatini, and not just Eswatini, but in the region, are in need of. So talk to us about your address. When we look at nonviolence and just peace, especially in the kingdom of Eswatini.
You want a preview of the event in Eswatini?
Just a little bit.
A little bit, okay. No, I mean, fine, the theme is chosen this way. It does not by any means suggest that, there's violence or anything in that part of the country, and that's why I'm coming. Yeah. So the theme or the topic may have been that, but that does not mean, that we're looking or we are trying to identify in this country any instance of violence or anything. Yeah, our world right now, though, has several manifestations of this. And there's nobody in the world who, in response to Pope Francis's call to prayer for peace in the world, will still not be able to discuss a subject matter or a theme like this. He's already talking about the violence in the world. It's made him talk about the Third World War began in pieces. And lately, with the conflict in Ukraine, he's invited us several times to prayer, for the resolution, for the cessation of hostilities in that part of the world. So essentially, for Christians, it's good to look at this situation of violence, okay, and then see whether how one can square this with what in the past means in the medieval period, in scholastic pure history, square with the theory of just war or whatever, which some have hung on to very strongly and think that is still something to carry on today, but which later reflection has led to basically its abandonment. But so the issue of you need to look at violent instances of it around the world, plus the real origin of violence, which is in the human heart, is something that is worth looking at all the time. For us means from the office that Pope Benedict invited me in the Vatican to occupy, violence has been something very human. It was the first instance of violence, the first instance of conflict that the Bible talks about and witnesses to. And since that is the case, it takes the form also of a fratricide. So there's real violence among human beings. It's always the character of a fratricide. Okay, because the first instance was between brothers. One brother kills another brother. That's a fratricide. And if all of humanity belongs to one human family, as we told in scriptures and as the church's own teachings has been talking about several times, then we need to recognize that any instance of a human being killing another human being is essentially also a fratricide. It's a brother killing a brother. So all of this reflection, just makes us want to wonder why we need to eschew violence from everything that we do as much as possible, because it's not something that we can consider extrinsic, to human existence or human environment. It's something that is very germane. It affects our sense and the character of the human family and everything that belongs to it. So I think the consideration of a subject matter like this, in the light of what is happening around the world, but most importantly because this year is also the 60th anniversary of Pacem in Terris, right? Pacem in Terris is an encyclical written by Pope John the 23rd, 60 years ago, at the instance of the great Cuban crisis. Okay, when Russia wanted to plant missiles in Cuba, and Kennedy of the United States didn't think it was so that type of Cold War crisis that almost led to the first instance of a nuclear war. Okay, it was 60 years ago, and it's funny why the instance in Ukraine bears similarity to that. Although the conflict is not between Russia and the United States, it's more Russia, Ukraine, and all of that. But since the support from the West is led by the U.S., it brings that to mind. And since again these countries have never ceased being nuclear countries, it brings their threat back again, probably in a more real form than was ever in the past. So for all of these very many reasons, it is just important to consider the instances of violence, especially in the form of military conflict again, at this time of and seek how we can, as as a human family, do away with this.
So speaking of that, if you look at Eswatini, the Catholic Church, the Catholic bishop there, Bishop Jose Ponce de Leon, has at various occasions spoken about the need for dialogue, to have dialogue, not just the Catholic Church, but the Council of Churches as well. And taking into consideration what you've just said, yes, the war is between Russia and Ukraine, but it has its impact on all over the world. And Africa is one of those continents that is really feeling the brunt of this war.
And in terms of food supply.
Yes, in food supply.
But not because we're supplying weapons or anything, but because of what the war does with food export and trade and stuff like that.
Yes.
Yeah, in that sense, it's something. It's a repercussion that we can actually reduce. Mm-hmm. Okay, when it's about food supply, I mean that's something that one can work on. But even the ability to reduce our dependence on food export and all of that does not deal away with the abhorrence of a war of any kind. Yes. Okay, effect or no effect, food supply or no food supply. It's just that violence and conflict does not belong to the human relationship, the human family, human character, and all of that.
But then what about the call for dialogue? What is your stance on that? I mean, Pope Francis himself is always calling for dialogue.
Sure. No, this again is a very natural thing, a very, if you want, even consequential on our creation. The human person is a relational being. Okay, we're created in relationship with God, our Creator, relationship with one another, call it brothers, sisters, parents, whatever type. So the fact that, so children of Adam and Eve and so whatever. So relationship between one another and relationship with creation, nature, okay, which supports and sustains our lives. Okay, so we are essentially relational being. And the way we live our relationship is again through what through this dialogue. Relationship invites us to be open to each other, to be open to one another, and we express this relationship of an openness to one another when we engage each other. Okay, we engage one another in conversation and all. So dialogue belongs to our nature. Okay, it's the way we express ourselves, it's the way we share our being with others, it's the way we share our thoughts and ideas with others, it's the way that we also receive the reality of the existence of others apart from ourselves. It's a relation we open ourselves to each other for the common good and our wholesome growth together. So dialogue is so very essential. But there are particular situations which call for this in a very enhanced form. Pope Francis called for this a lot in his encyclical Laudato Si about creation, where he says, come, let us chat, let us talk together to see a solution to a very common problem. There's the challenge of a climate crisis and all faces, all of us, we face all of this together. And so it is good that we can come together, talk together, find solutions together towards dealing with this. That's, a form of dialogue he talks about. But in a light of conflict also, he calls for two things. In a situation of conflict or unwholesome relationship, one can either treat things with diffidence or avoidance, indifference. One can also decide to engage. That's why he calls for a culture of encounter. Okay, when we engage with reality and with things outside ourselves, that creates a setting for this dialogue that we need to live. So he basically presents before us two opposed realities. Okay, he talks about the thing for us to do is never to be indifferent to any situation. Everybody's interest should be our interest. The interest of creation, whatever type of thing, should be our own. So in the encyclical Laudato Si, he talks about the presentation of the data in the encyclical in such a way that we will be driven and invited to feel the pain that nature feels at its exploitation and everything that we do into it. So it's an invitation to share, okay, in the experience of the other. And so this basically underlines the call to encounter, call for a culture of encounter, meeting, instead of avoiding, instead of treating with indifference or not caring about other situation. So the interesting expressions that he uses sometimes. For this thing about indifference, which is a very real attitude that people adopt to situations, he says it's like almost watching something from your balcony. Okay, when you live in a balcony and there's something happening down on the street, you can stay in your balcony and watch it without getting involved. Opposed to this is the culture of the Good Samaritan, okay, who goes to engage, who interests himself in the situation and brings some change to it. So that ultimately is the setting of the culture of encounter in which dialogue thrives or develops towards getting us interested in the situation of one another. And the interest in the situation of one another is basically what invites us to formulate a difference, a change, or solution to anything that we find ourselves in.